listening to Artist Kaleidoscope with Nancy Tansy Busher. We're meeting today with R.J. Coons. He's an author, a husband, a volunteer. I think first we'll talk about his book, Loud Music.
Well, Loud Music is a mystery adventure. It takes place in southwest Florida. And our main heroine is a park ranger, Blaine Sterling. Blaine, for years, has been a champion of the environment. Wanted to be a park ranger for all her life. Volunteered in high school for community groups to clean parks and rivers and streams, and was ecstatic to receive, after she graduated from college, a job as a park ranger at Fire Island, New York. A series of events occurred. She moved to Florida and is now a park ranger at the Osprey State Park. That is the events surrounding Blaine Sterling and the adventure that happens to her and her family. The title of Loud Music starts with Blaine Sterling going out in the morning to pick up her newspaper. The newspaper carrier, for some reason, started to blast his radio late at night, waking Blaine up. And Blaine, of course, could not get back to sleep, hence the title Loud Music. When she opened up the newspaper that morning, in the paper was a Christmas card from the newspaper carrier, Earl Nye, the newspaper guy. That set off a series of events that just disturbed her completely after being awakened night after night. She decided to go down to the newspaper to complain about the loud music. The manager of the newspaper, after 45 years of service, he was going to be dismissed. Blaine didn't realize that this was his last day. She thought she could talk about the newspaper carrier and get this all resolved. However, the manager had other
things on his mind.
And there the mystery starts. What I like to do in the book is to add sort of the peace and quiet and tranquility that comes about in the park. It's a different world there. Although there are events that are threatening to some degree, on the whole, the park itself is just a beautiful place to be.
I think there might be something we need to clear up a little bit. The newspaper incident took place in New York, didn't it? And the park, of course, is in Venice. Well, it's in what? Nokomis?
Osprey.
It's in Osprey, Florida?
Right. The prologue of the book introduces Blaine and background of why she came to Florida. What had happened was there was a hurricane and she was instructed to evacuate everyone from the park. It was on an island, of course, and the ferry took all the campers that were there and people that were in the marina. All the boats were asked to leave. And she was there to shutter the park and make sure everything was safe. She thought that all of the campers had gone. However, there was one camper that fell asleep drunk on the beach when the hurricane hit and raced up the East Coast, slammed into Fire Island. The camper woke up and was looking for a place to shelter. He finally made it back to the campsite where Blaine was living. He raped her. There was a trial. He was acquitted because there were political connections with his family. And so she felt it was time to leave. After a job opening here in Florida, she gladly accepted it and moved here. She fell in love, met her husband. They were married, but he disappeared. He just, one day from work, received a call, and this is what she was told by the police, and disappeared.
Never made it home.
The police thought it was a lover's quarrel because they were just married, or maybe he ran away with another woman, but nothing for 8 long years. However, within the book, we find the mystery of his disappearance. At the end of the book, there's a big question mark, and that leads us into the sequel of the Blaine Sterling
And
mysteries.
the sequel is Three Bridges.
The sequel is Three Bridges, which represent the 3 bridges that people can take to get into Venice, Florida. There in itself is another event that centers around the park. Some of the criminals dealing with the 3 bridges are camping at the park. And of course, Blaine, being the park ranger, is part of the final adventure.
Okay, I want to ask you, now I know I heard you talking about this the other day, and it just really got my attention. Tell us a little bit about the situations you ran into when you were researching the book. These are amazing.
They are. I'm so excited when I try to solve a problem, and I can, and as a result, I ask people. And I've been very fortunate. I would say that about 95% of the people, when you go up to them and you're reasonable and say, listen, I'm writing a book, could you please help me? They do. And there are just many, many stories. For example, in Loud Music, the circulation manager is going to commit suicide. He's going to blow himself up and kill the editor that fired him. I really didn't know anything about bombs, so I went on the internet and I was looking up how do you make bombs? And of course my wife said, listen, what on earth are you doing? You crazy? Shut it down. And now that with the NSA and the information we're finding that they're monitoring people, I said to myself, I'm in a lot of trouble because this is a major, major part of the book where this man blows himself up. How am I going to get information? And it took me a while to think.
And from Venice, Florida. Too.
And in Venice, Florida, too, because that's where the newspaper is. It came to me that Florida has legal fireworks. So I decided to go to one of the big fireworks store. Art Dunn, who was the manager, collected all these fireworks and put them together to blow himself up. And I went to one of the fireworks stores, and there was this young high school kid behind the counter. And I said, listen, I'm interested in buying fireworks. I mean, really, I want a big, package. This fireworks store was cavernous, and we walked in the back. He's pointing out all the things. He finally finds one great big box up in the top, and it was, I think, like $300, $400. He said, this is the top of the line. It really has a lot of power. So then I said, listen, I'm writing a book, and I was just wondering if I took all these fireworks and put them all together, would I be able to explode a body? Well, with that, the guy turned sheet white. Said, listen, are you some kind of a nut or something? I'm going to call my manager. And he raced to the front of the store. And I said, no, listen, I'm just writing a book. Everything is okay. So I left. And
people have no idea what all is involved in researching a book.
The book is fiction, but it's not science fiction. It needs to have some type of basis for truth. In the new book, one of the characters is an FBI rogue agent. He commandeers a plane. He has $10 million in the plane. He crashes it right off Venice Beach, and he has a friend of his to pick him up, who happens to be one of the bridge tenders for 3 bridges, and that's where the title comes in. I don't know how to fly a plane, and I don't know what planes do. I do remember reading an article on the JetBlue pilot Sully, who landed his jet plane after being hit by Canadian geese that flew into the engine. Then he landed it successfully into the Hudson River. I was flying to North Carolina to see my son, and there just happened to be a pilot waiting in the area. So I said to myself, why don't I go over and ask him, how you would crash a plane? But I was innocent about the whole thing. And of course, when I asked him about it, he gave me first a queer type look, but was very, very knowledgeable about flying a plane. Gave me a lot of information, which I will be using in the next book. People help you, and I've been very fortunate with that, especially in the park.
I know that you volunteer for Oscar Scherer State Park, so you're in the park quite a bit. Tell us how that affected your story.
I am. I fell in love with the park. Actually, for the past 7 years, have volunteered for various events, met many of the rangers and the volunteers, and of course the campers. The park rangers and the volunteers have been very, very helpful. I knew nothing about a park ranger. The idea came to me that many of our mystery books, the characters are FBI agents, retired policemen, male-oriented from the armed services. I thought, well, how about a different character that believe in saving the environment, a female, a strong role model, but again gets into trouble because that's how the world is at times. And so that's how I came up with the idea of having a park ranger as the main character.
Yeah. I was reading something just the other day that said, it's very difficult for a man to write a female role and vice versa. It takes a special talent to do that.
It is, and it has been, and I've struggled at times, especially with the sex scenes. There is romance in the book, and being a male, reversing the roles were difficult, especially in the prologue. I thought it important because we needed something to show the audience why Blaine Sterling was here in Florida, and to talk about the strength that this woman had. I know rape is very controversial, very personal, and I struggled a long, long time, and I must have rewritten the prologue 10 times. It was too graphic at times, and then at other times it wasn't sensitive enough to show the feelings, the terror of the rape itself. But I didn't want it to
Such an invasion.
Right, such an invasion. Throughout the book, it comes into play as to her character, her strength, and her drive not to be a victim again, but not to victimize other people. She has a 7-year-old daughter, Brooke, that she brings up as a single parent. And to be a strong role model, she needed all of these qualities. And again, she needed to fight back the memories of that horrific night. It is a struggle. But you know what I found? When I first started writing, I only wrote 2 days a week. And the book just wasn't moving. I just couldn't connect with it. I write every day now. And I write, and I think this is important. I tell people when I go on talks, it's a business. You need a place, a time, and you need to write every day. And what I find by doing that, and I'm sure all authors do, the book starts to talk to you. It takes on a life of its own. And the path that I initially thought the book would take in the beginning is now different. The characters that are in the book take on a life of their own and move in a direction. And there are a series of characters that support the main character. I mean, Lou Bravo, who is the unofficial mayor of Venice, is a character all amongst himself. And his friend Tony Lilly is another character. They're both on the fringe of being legal versus illegal. And of course, Hubba Bubba, the gum-chewing helper, all do crazy things that help add humor to the book, as well as a little suspense, too. So...
I love it. I wrote a book one time. It started out being a story about a little 3-year-old in the park. And when it was finished, it ended up being a one-act play called The Girl in the Park. And she's there because she's had an abortion and she ends up bleeding to death.
Oh my.
Because she didn't follow doctor's orders. You never know. The one was just so strong I couldn't turn my back on it.
Wow. There are certain topics that are very strong and impact a lot of people. Loud music, I'm very fond of it. There are points in there that are topics that are poignant in today's society. I'm not sure if I'm ready right now to, make statements that are going to change the world. I want people to enjoy the book. It's a fiction. There is romance. There is suspense.
There's a message, though.
There is a message, and I think the message is the goodness of people. And I do like happy endings, I have to say that.
Well, I think, too, I just feel that in the long run, the good is greater than the bad.
Right.
And you're going to experience both in this life.
Right. I try not to dwell on the negative, the kidnapping, the child abduction, the suicide of Art Dunn, the manager. We then move on. There's the wonderful bucolic life that is led within the park. The family attraction between Blaine Sterling and her daughter, and friends at the beach at Venice Beach looking for shark's teeth. All of these things I put together different subplots that I hope people will enjoy.
I read I guess it's the prologue that was on your website.
Yes.
It was very well written. Should be, I guess, after 70.
Right. Initially, the book started out with loud music being played by the newspaper carrier. That in itself is another story, because I didn't know anything about newspapers. I went to the local newspaper down in Venice, and they mentioned that I was a writer, and one of the characters is a newspaper delivery person. Could I come and watch the news carriers, what they do? Well, the woman manager thought I was some kind of spy from another newspaper, and was somewhat reticent. And so I said, all right, that's fine. If you feel uncomfortable, I won't. So I went to the other newspaper. And the owner asked, did I subscribe to the newspaper, which I did. So he said, oh, sure, let him come down. But they don't start working on the newspapers until around 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. I went there, met the manager. She was a wonderful woman. There's a whole different culture of people late at night working. And there at the newspaper were just a varied range of people, from young people to old people, families, single, and of course, hardworking people wanting to get the paper done. And then, of course, there were people fooling around and having a grand old growth. So when I wrote about the Earl Nye, the newspaper guy, I embellished upon one of the characters that were there. I added some characters. There were some college girls that also worked at the paper, and I threw them in. Star Trek guy, who is a computer genius who works for Best Buy in Sarasota. And all of these characters blend together to help Earl Nye, who is a character amongst himself, push the book along. Some of them will be in the new book that comes down the road, and some of them won't.
Does Oscar Scherer have a gift shop?
They do. I didn't use the term Oscar Scherer because I just felt a little uncomfortable but they support the book. I know the manager of the Tony Clements is the manager. I gave him a book, gave a presentation, and raffled a few of the books. So some of the people have read the book. There is a beautiful nature center which is in the book. Blaine Sterling and Mary Beth Maiello are friends, and there's a whole activity where they do science, and the park does do science projects with school children. And so a lot of that is factual. There's a gopher tortoise there at the park, and having the funeral for the gopher tortoise, I sort of embellished upon that. But they did have a gopher tortoise that hung around the nature center for years.
Oh my God.
The scrub jays are very popular at Oscar Scherer. A large habitat, one of the only habitats for scrub jays are there.
We in Florida do not see any threat to their existence because in Florida, at least around here, they are everywhere. And of course, they're protected.
At the park, I introduce a character, the Purple Lady, Vardy Zamiello, who is a combination of my old art teacher when I was a principal at the school, a hippie from back in the early 70s, 60s. And I threw her into the park because every time I go to the park, there's this sign for the campground that was sort of like ho-hum. So I thought, let's throw in an artist who's camping, who is colorful, right. She took it upon herself to paint the campground sign. She has a sense of humor where she plays with Blaine Sterling because Blaine Sterling is the park ranger and you have to follow certain rules.
Right, she's the authority figure.
She is. So she saw Miss Vardy up on a ladder, which happened to be purple, painting the sign. The Purple Lady talks about, oh, well, I'm going to put a purple dolphin, a purple flamingo, and of course Blaine is fit to be tied. But what Miss Vardy had permission from the park manager to make, and she made a beautiful, beautiful sign. But the connection between Miss Vardy and Blaine Sterling, while the Purple Lady was gathering materials and riding her bike through the park, she heard motorcycles way in the back of the park where they shouldn't have been. She relays that message to Blaine Sterling. And as a result, the first major conflict with the antagonist in the story, Remy Cole, also a park ranger who is renting out the back of the park for ATVs and motorcycles and making a fortune on the side. Their story starts the conflict that puts Blaine Sterling in harm's way.
Yeah.
And it's a major part of the story, but it all happens with the connection between the Purple Lady.
Right.
So
this is exciting. I can't wait.
all right.
Thank you
Great.
for being on the program.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
One more question. Three Bridges has not been released yet.
No, by the end of 2014. I do tell some of the people about it a little bit, just to perk their
Kind of.
interest.
Pre-selling is good with
Right,
books.
right.
Yes.
Right.
Okay. Well, thank you so much,
Thank you.
RJ.
Thank you. My pleasure.
And we'll talk to you again.
Okay.
Thank you for joining us. This is Artist Kaleidoscope with Nancy Tansey Busher.